Okay, Rhonda, you have control, right?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healing Chronicles. Good to see you. We're going to go ahead and get started. So bear with me as I deal with the technical stuff. Okay. Right. This beautiful video was edited by Nia Chen from Chen Studios, who is here. Thank you, Nia. All right. So, before we begin, we just have a few rules of engagement. If any of you have questions, you can use the chat. Rhonda Mendoza, our lovely co-host, will be able to share the questions with gaps in the programming. So you can just let her know, hey, Rhonda, I have a question, or you can write it and she can read it. This is going to be a heavy hour and a half. And there may be some topics that we may not all be in agreement, but as adults, we can agree to disagree and do so in a mature fashion. And we just want you all to be honest. We want you to be comfortable, feel like you're in a safe environment. The purpose of the Healing Chronicles is to look at the Black history of a thing, particular topics, and then look at where we are now, and then look at what we can do going forward. If we're ever going to heal as a country, we have to talk about these things that are uncomfortable. We have to lift up the rug and put a microscope to specific topics in order to change behaviors and make change happen. So, Rhonda, say hello to everyone.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rhonda, and I will be your co host. Welcome.
Thank you. So, I usually start off with an announcement, and I wanted to give a shout out to Sora Lottie Joyner, who is the editor in chief of the NAACP Crisis magazine, and just wanted to share with you, Rhonda, if you could put that link in the chat, that would be great. They have a special voting edition. All of us know we are 6 days away from we're not sure what, but many of you are on the phone. I mean, are on the Zoom call to talk about this. But this special edition covers voter suppression, election security, the power of the youth vote and voter mobilization during these times, during these crazy times. And the illustration of the cover, which I think is absolutely beautiful, is by Mark Ulrichsen, who has done covers for New York Magazine. So make sure you have an opportunity to check it out. Um, Beautiful, beautiful magazine. Okay. Now, we know we're going to deal with some heavy topics, but I wanted to start off with some good vibes, with some good energy, because we need it. I'm sure we can all agree that we need it. So, Art, I am going to introduce you to throw to your awesome video, Good Times.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Monda, for inviting me on. And hello to everyone. My name is Aure. The video that we are about to see is my latest single entitled Good Times. And it's a positive, uplifting, upbeat, feel good song. And hopefully, it'll put a smile on your faces tonight and anytime you watch this video. And we're going to go to Good Times.
Okay. Can you all see the screen?
Yeah.
Can you see the screen? No?
Yeah.
You can't see it? Not of the video. We see the screen of the introductory slide. Okay, hang on. Okay, I think my share. All right, share screen. All right, here we are. All right, Art, we're gonna do this again. Okay, let's have some good times. Thanks, Art.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Rhonda. Thank you so much for having me. And I just wanted to say, I know that the video skipped a little bit, but you can check me out at Art is Worldwide on social media. And my website is hellogoodtimes.art. And you can see everything that we have going on. There's a fundraiser, a campaign that we're doing to support what I'm doing in the arts and everything that we have going on. And also my latest song prior to Good Times is Keep On. And that song was actually chosen by the Black Women for Biden campaign as their theme leading up to this election. And I just wanted to say I voted last night and it felt great. And it's amazing to be on this panel with you all. So thank you for having me. And yeah, let's get into the good topics.
Thank you, Art. Appreciate you. I'm gonna switch things around a little bit. Sean Perryman, you're here, right?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, very good. Um, we have well, Sean, we're going to have him speak first. He is running for lieutenant governor for Virginia, and he's got a crazy schedule. Catherine, thank you so much for introducing us this earlier this month. So I am going to quickly introduce, well, Sean, I guess you can introduce yourself since you're here.
Oh wow, you got it already.
Yeah, yes, I did it. Okay, no, but so if you could just tell us a little bit, and I'm a storyteller, and I'm always about hearing people's stories, and I'm excited tonight. We have some really good people on the line that can share their stories with us for about voting and civil rights. Why have you now? Yeah, just give us a little hint of who you are and what your role is with the NAACP and why you decided to
Sure.
run. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And I'll tell you a story. Why don't we
Okay.
do that? Since you want to, I can do that. So my name is Sean Perryman. I'm running for lieutenant governor. Currently, I serve as president of the Fairfax County NAACP, which is the largest chapter here in Virginia. I took over as president about a year and a half ago, and I grew the branch from somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 members to now we have 1,300 members. And I am the youngest president in the branch's 102-year history. So it's a great honor to serve in this position. But I'll tell the story of how I got here, and that'll also explain why I'm running for office. So in 2016, I was a practicing attorney. I graduated from Vanderbilt Law School, practiced for a number of years doing litigation. And I was always interested in activism. I see someone wearing a Trayvon Martin shirt. That was actually one of the things that really made me want to get back into activism. But the checks were, to be honest, were too alluring in the private practice, and I was doing that, and I kind of lost my way. And one day, a partner walked into my firm here in DC and said, "We have a new client, and it's Donald Trump." And so it was at that time he was candidate Trump, and I didn't know what to do with that because I really wasn't aligned with the things he was saying. To make things worse, the case was against Chef Jose Andres. Jose Andres was going to do a restaurant in the Trump Hotel in DC. And when Donald Trump made all the comments he made about Mexicans and everything else, Jose Andres pulled out of that deal. So Trump sued him. So they wanted me to be the senior associate on this case and say that the comments that he made were fine, that they weren't that big a deal, and that, the contract should go on, et cetera, et cetera. And so I had just bought a house. I had a 1-year-old daughter. And I made a decision to quit my firm rather than represent him. So that was something where I had to really stand on my values and figure out what meant something to me. I was lucky enough, because I was crazy to quit my job. I don't want to gloss over that, but I was lucky enough to get a job with Congressman Elijah Cummings, which was the great honor of my life at that time, to work with Congressman Cummings. And I thought, I quit my job, I stood on my values, I'm doing enough. And sure enough, at that time, there was no chance that Donald Trump would ever be president. Well, spoiler alert, he became president. So I was there, found myself in November thinking, I'm not doing nearly enough. There has to be more that I can do. And I started to look at my local community, and there was Jeb Stuart High School and Robert E. Lee High School, And I was thinking about, we're talking about the racism and the vitriol that we're seeing at the national level. But right here in my community, we see the same things. So I went to join the NAACP. And it's one of those things where you sign up and you keep getting more work. And they kept giving me work until eventually I became president of the organization. And I remember when I took on the Robert E. Lee name change, and I said, we need to change this. It needs to start here. We're seeing Charlottesville happening only miles from us. We're seeing all these things here, and we have a Robert E. Lee High School. We have to change it. I was told it would be impossible to do. Well, today, many of you may know, that school is named John Lewis High School. And that was through our advocacy, the NAACP here in Fairfax, and the work we put in. And there was many stories of that, like that, of us getting involved in the community and making not only symbolic change, but substantive change that would save, save and help people day to day. This year, or last year, we made changes to the memorandum of understanding between the schools and the police. And the changes we made, within 1 year, we saw a 60% reduction in arrests. So that's 60% fewer kids that end up in the school to prison pipeline. And so I saw how working in your community, you can make these changes. And it may feel like it's hard work at times and that it's not going anywhere, but these are people, real life people that are behind those percentages, that you're keeping them out of that system. So running for office is not something I thought I would do, but when I also didn't think I'd be wearing a mask or sanitizing my groceries or any of the number of other things I'm doing. And so when I saw this pandemic happen and saw how many companies, small businesses were going out of business, the Los Angeles Lakers got a CARES Act check, but your mom and pop store probably did not. So I saw that the system was just not serving people on the ground. Here in Northern Virginia, the Latino community had a 50% positive rate for COVID at certain testing sites. So we saw day in and day out how people were not being served. And I then went to the George Floyd murder and saw, talking to our state senators, how they just didn't seem to understand what the issues were on the ground. And I started to say, well, maybe I could speak to those issues. And that's why I decided to run for lieutenant governor. I know what I'm doing is bold, but I think in this time, in the middle of a pandemic where we're reckoning with race, here in Virginia, the way we understand race in America started right here. You can trace it back to Bacon's Rebellion. And right here in Virginia, we came up with the concept of white and black and our understanding of it as it is today. So I look at the next week of this monumental election of saving our democracy. But then I look at the 2021 election, which I'm running in, as broadcasting what we want for a future for our country, what we want for a future for the state. And we can do that. And I always say my campaign is about the E's: education, economics, equity, and the environment. These are the things that we need to put at the forefront to push us into not only the next decade, but the next years and years to come. So I'm going to be out there on the campaign trail. We've already had a good start. We have 31 endorsements already, and we're going to keep going. And I think our message will resonate with folks, because I'm not a politician doing this to get the next promotion. I'm someone who's worked in the community. I'm an attorney. I'm someone who works in tech policy now. And I'm looking to do this so that we can create a future for my daughter and for everyone's kids and generations to come that makes them feel valued, makes them feel that they have something to look forward to in their community. So I'll stick around if you want me to, but that's sort of my story in a nutshell. I try to keep it short because I know you have important conversations to have. But you can find more about my campaign at perrymanforvirginia.com. The biggest thing for me now would be donations. Joe Biden has tons of money. If you want to give me $1 or $2, I would take it. And of course, I'll need volunteers going forward once we get past this November election. So would love to talk to you all, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it. And Mark, as the host of Make It Plain, if you have any burning questions, please feel free to jump in and ask our guests any questions that you may think of during the program.
Oh, in terms of Sean, I mean, this is great, brother. Congratulations. It's a small world. I grew up in Nashville, went to high school right across the street from Vanderbilt. So the burning question I would have for you, so in Virginia, you run for lieutenant governor outright. Are you going to support any of the gubernatorial candidates who may run? Have you made a decision about that, or do you just try to stay out of that?
Honestly, I just try to stay out of that. One of the things I'm running on is lieutenant governor. The reason I'm being purposeful in staying out of it is because I want to be an independent lieutenant governor. The roles are separate, and obviously if they're from the same party, you do help each other out. But I think we need someone in this position to be an honest broker with the public and say, hey, the governor is not right in this case. The state Senate's doing this, and just not playing party politics, but speaking as an advocate for the people. I want to be there advocating for people on the ground.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good luck, brother.
I appreciate y'all, and this is about my 30-second Zoom of the day, so I do a lot of these. So, but good to see all your faces and get a little music. Really loved Art's video, so that was awesome. If they haven't already, I'll drop my website in here so people can check it out.
Please do. Please do. Zoom fatigue is real.
Hey, you got to do it.
I'm fatigued, but I love Monda. If I didn't love Monda, I don't know y'all. I don't know.
All right, thank you. So now we are going to have our historic moment. We generally do these Sankofa style, where we talk about what was, and then where we are and where we're going. Here, there's a quote that Oprah mentioned why she voted. She says, I vote for all the people who make a way out of no way so that I might live in a world of choices. I vote for those who marched and prayed and sacrificed and withstood humiliations and disrespect and devastation just trying to cast a ballot. I vote for those who died carrying the dream that one day their vote would be counted and could matter. I vote for the shoulders I stand on, for those who paid for the crown that I get to wear. And in the photo, this is a part of my why. On the right hand side is my great grandmother, Georgia Terry, and she was kicked out of the state of Georgia. She lived in Albany, which was one of the, historically, many of you know, was one of the hardest towns to crack during the civil rights movement. And she was booted out of the state of Georgia for trying to get black people to register to vote. She was sent to an Indian school in Kayante, Arizona. So the young men that you see here are actually indigenous people, Native Americans. And their clothes look the way they do because they had to wear whatever was sent to them. And it being as though it was an Indian school, they were still taught quote unquote American principles. And unfortunately, when some of them went back to their reservations, they had forgotten their mother tongue, their language, which is an entirely other, it's another discussion on its own. But for Mama Georgia and for what she went through, I make it a point. Mom and I, we were there first thing Monday morning when Montgomery County, Maryland opened up. So this is part of my why. Also, on the greater scale, this may be a little hard to look at, but there were riots in November 2nd, 1920. A gentleman who was a wealthy businessman by the name of Norman Perry was killed for trying to vote. He told the judge, as they are doing now, there were white people trying to suppress the black vote and threatening them and turning them away. And this gentleman went and told the judge, you know, we're being turned away. And a white mob arrested him, dragged him through the streets, and hung him on a telephone pole and attached a sign to him that said, this is what we do to the N word who try to vote. So for those types of sacrifices, I would be remiss if I didn't exercise my right to vote. And with that, I am going to introduce Connie St. John, who's the president of No Weapon Productions. Her production company changes lives through entertainment. And she will share a little bit of history on the vote. And we have in our presence, and we'll talk about it next, a woman who actually marched from Selma to Montgomery as a result of, well, she can tell you that when I call her up. So again, Catherine, thanks for the connect. And CJ, thank you so much for inviting Miss Margaret to join us. So Connie, I'm giving it to you.
Thank you, Manda. Thank you for inviting me to share a little bit as well. So I will say Manda asked for some personal stories, and I think she thought of me to share the history because I'm not a historian. I will tell you that I'm an entertainer. That is, I'm a storyteller like Manda. It's my first career and first love. But I recently was asked to give a keynote speech to an organization in Washington State that is predominantly a white organization and white male led, and they wanted me to speak on diversity. They wanted me to give an education of how we got to where we are now, a little bit of an education about that. And then they asked me if I could do it without using the word diversity. They asked me if I could do it and make sure that it stayed light. They didn't want anything too heavy as I talked about the history of race relations and the relationship with African Americans and police. So they asked me if I could do it and keep it light. And so I did decline the fact that I said I can't do it and not use the word diversity. This is a diversity speech. I'm not going to be able to do that. That word will come up. And I will do the best I can in terms of keeping it light, but this isn't a light subject. So I wanted to make sure I knew that, and many people said they would have just declined. They would have just said no outright, just let that be it. And I thought about that, to be honest with you, because I know as African Americans, we are often asked, can you help us understand? Can you give me an education? That kind of thing. And there's a piece that is, a piece of that says I shouldn't have to. And yet when we're asked, if we can be a bridge, we can somehow be a light to a population that is in darkness, that really just doesn't get it. If we can do that, then it's worth doing. And so I chose to be that bridge and be that light to that organization. And it worked out fine. But I recognized my role. And it was one of the hardest keynote speeches, I will tell you, that I've ever had to give. So my goal in that was to synthesize the historic information down to pieces that they could digest. And some of that, I had to learn some things as well. So I'm just going to talk just a few minutes to give you all a history of voting rights, and how that all played out, and some of the things that I learned along the way. So first I want to share a quote from Frederick Douglass that he gave after slavery was ended, which is, "Slavery is not abolished until the Black man has the ballot." So he said that in May of 1865. After slavery ended, we went through a 12-year period called the Reconstruction period. And it was from approximately 1865 to 1877. It was short-lived. It was a 12-year period where Black participation, for instance, in Southern public life was the best it's been. Then, since, and for any country that had slavery and then abolished slavery, it was short-lived though. And so W.E.B. Du Bois said, "Slave went free, stood a brief moment in the sun, and moved back again towards slavery." What is so important to understand is even the moment that slavery ended, the moment it ended, immediately what went into effect were Black codes. And Black codes and Jim Crow laws are very similar, but they're different periods. So the first thing was Black codes. And so from 1865 to approximately 1867, they had state and local laws that said how Blacks could move around, where they could work. If they didn't have a job, then they could be arrested for vagrancy. And in the 13th Amendment, which was the one that freed the slaves, there was the loophole that they could be enslaved again if they had broken the law. So these Black codes were designed specifically to make sure that there was a setup to break the law. They first would say, you have to have a contract for work for the entire year. So starting in January, you have to show us a contract that says you're employed for the year. And if you don't have that contract, you're considered a vagrant. And if you're a vagrant, you can be arrested for vagrancy and put back into servitude. That's the way you work through that. So that's what the Black codes were. And then Jim Crow laws started immediately following. So they struck down the Black codes and said, okay, well, this is not okay. They had a civil rights bill in 1866, pretty much when the Black codes were ending, and it gave Black Americans the rights of regular citizens. And as soon as that civil rights bill was passed in 1866, that's when the Jim Crow laws began. And the Jim Crow laws were really about segregation primarily. They allowed all types of discrimination against Blacks. So the 14th Amendment, which was in 1868, allowed Blacks to be citizens. So first we had, they call them Reconstruction, the 3 Reconstruction Amendments. 13th, which ended slavery, 14th, which allowed Blacks to become citizens, and then the 15th Amendment, which gave Blacks the right to vote. And so, by the way, Monty asked me to make sure I mentioned it. It wasn't until the 19th Amendment in 1920 that women got the right to vote. But we're still back in the 15th Amendment in 1869. So Blacks have gotten the right to vote. But what they did was they couldn't discriminate according to that amendment based on race. So they put in other means of discrimination, poll taxes and literacy tests and things like that that would keep Blacks from being able to vote. Many states passed a grandfather clause. If your grandfather had not voted in an election, then you couldn't vote. But of course, their grandfathers had been slaves who weren't citizens and were not allowed to vote. So many of the states got away with that. And that went on, those kinds of things, that kind of discrimination went on until 1965, which is crazy. So the law that said we could vote was in 1869, and not until the Voting Rights Act, and as Mondes mentioned, Selma, the March to Selma, that was when Lyndon Johnson saw what happened in Selma, went to Congress and passed the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Let me tell you where my personal interest is with this. What caused the Selma situation to explode the way that it did and lead to the Voting Rights Act was that it was televised. That's what did it. It was nationally televised. They saw how people were treated. They saw them, hosed and beaten. And yet again, as you all know, as it relates to whether it's George Floyd or anybody else, typically what happens, to shine the light on it, is somebody has to televise it. Somebody records it with their phone. There's some kind of video, and that's what leads to the change. Because the Black person, I can tell you, certain of these things have been going on since I was born, since my parents were born, my grandparents were born, but nobody saw it. So people didn't believe it. It was hard to believe. Are you sure they did that? Maybe they didn't mean that. Maybe it didn't really happen. Only when these things are televised and shown do we finally get some buy-in, and somebody with a heart will say, wait a second, that's not right. That's when things start changing. So that's what happened with the Selma situation. So after the Voting Rights Act of 1965, one of the statistics I found that in Mississippi alone, voter turnout among Black people increased from 6% 1964 to 59% in 1969. In 1961, the 24th Amendment had eliminated poll taxes, but only for federal elections. And it wasn't until 1966 that the Supreme Court then eliminated poll taxes for state and local elections. Because up until then, they were still using by any means necessary to keep Blacks from voting. Before 1965, only 23% of eligible Black voters were registered. In 1969, 61% of eligible Black voters were registered. And then in 2012, So the turnout, not numbers, but percentage. The percentage of registered voters who turned out and voted exceeded white voters. So Black voters, 66+% of eligible Black voters turned out to help reelect President Obama versus 64% of eligible white voters. Now, the numbers don't stack up, obviously, because we're 12, 13% of the population versus the majority. But in terms of the numbers of voters, the percentage of Black voters, you can see it there. In 2016, that number dropped down to 59% in terms of eligible Black voters who turned out to vote. And our hope and our goal is that that number will increase this year again. Number of potential eligible Black voters is second only right now to the number of Hispanic or Latino voters in terms of the percentage eligible to vote. Historically, number of eligible voters of African Americans exceeds the number of voters of eligible Latinos. So we will see what happens with that. I do want to mention that 4 out of 10 voters this year are either millennials or Gen Zers, which is exciting. So we have a significant, that's 40% of Black voters are millennials or Gen Z. I also want to explain what's going on with the Voting Rights Act. So this is an act that is in perpetuity, but we keep hearing about how it's in danger, it's going to end, pieces of it change. What has happened is that in 2013 and in other years, the Supreme Court has had cases that they've heard where they've changed or modified pieces of the Voting Rights Act to our detriment, fortunately. So there are many elements to it, and I actually downloaded the entire text because I wanted to read through it. They first put the Voting Rights Act in effect in '65. One of the things that they made sure of was that states that had historically discriminated against Black voters, they could not change their voting requirements without federal approval. So that way they couldn't go back to a place of discrimination. That's what was torn down in 2013. The Supreme Court said that portion of it was not legal. They turned that around. So in the moment they did, many of those same Southern states started enacting laws that said you have to have a photo ID, or they changed whether or not early voting was allowed. And of course, it disproportionately affected poor, elderly, Black, and Latino, which is per usual, the goal. So that's what's happened in terms of the Voting Rights Act has not been struck down, but pieces of it. They pick apart pieces of it, the parts that allow states to put back in after 100 years of us having the right to vote, or 100+ years, they start putting those little stipulations back in. Okay, well, not a test, but we'll just put in, I mean, it was anything. It was, you had to own property. Your grandfather had to be a voter. Then you had to take a literacy test. You had, in the test, I read one of those literacy tests. Oh my gosh, it was illiterate, the test itself. So trying to get the answers right when the questions were all screwed up was horrible. It was horrible. So the fact that they've struck down the part that says don't have to have any more oversight if they decide to change the voting requirements yet again, that's the problem. That's what happened with in 2013. Those kinds of changes are the things that keep going. So our hope this year, as Manda mentioned, so many people died, walked, were beaten for our right to vote. They did everything that they could for our right to vote, and not just Black people, but white people who stood side by side, Jewish people who stood shoulder to shoulder with us to fight for our rights to vote as well. I don't want to disappoint them by having our people not go out there and vote the way they should. So, thank you, Manda, for allowing me to present to you guys. You're muted, darling.
Okay, thank you, Manda. I do have a story to tell. You are a storyteller also. became an activist at a very young age, although I didn't call myself an activist at that time. I was 8 years of age. It was the last day of my 3rd grade year. And I slipped from school and went home because I thought my older sisters were going to the Memphis Zoo. My mother told me, no, no one's going to the zoo. If you can't go to the zoo on any day, you can't go at all. At that time, Blacks had only 1 day out of the 7 to attend the zoo. My mother set me on the couch in what was called the front room. And for the first time, I heard the words Jim Crow. She told me that it was a mythology that claimed that white skin was superior to those that had Black or brown skin. She said that was a fallacy. It was not true, that I was as good as anybody else. My intrinsic worth was as great as anybody else's. And for that reason, until we could go to the zoo or to the library on any day, we couldn't go at all. Intuitively, I knew that something important had happened to me on that day. I didn't fully grasp the implications of it until I became older. And it was at that time that I knew what I would be doing with the rest of my adult life, at least. And that would be to be an activist. And that's what I've done. You mentioned the Selma to Montgomery March. The march, my activism didn't simply start at that point. It started at the age of 8, growing up in a Jim Crow area in Memphis, Tennessee. My contours were defined for me, not of who I was, the intelligence that I had, or the ideas that I had. And I knew that I had to get out of that. With my parents also agreed that, no, you are as good as anybody else. And I've taken that intrinsically and held it inside me for all of the years of my life. There's an old story that goes, what your parents tell you live inside you. It was my call to action. And that has been my call to action whenever I step out to a protest march, to write a letter to a congressperson, to write a letter to Eric Holder, to write a letter to the president, to call my congresspeople. So when I marched in 1965, I was already aware of all of the events of the 50s and the 60s that led up to that event. I was aware of the degradation that white people placed on a Black body. It had started in 1619, and it has been continuous through the year that we live now in 2020. My goal at that march, and for all of the other marches, has been to help the Union live up to the words in the Declaration of Independence. And I know that we can do that. I remember so vividly that day in March when I joined that group on the last day of the Selma to Montgomery March. It was a Thursday. The exhilaration, the pride, just the camaraderie of all the people around me in that march made for such a brilliant and beautiful day, listening to the speeches. I also remember at the end of the day, as we were going back, I lived in Chicago at the time, on our plane, we had to stop in Atlanta because of an engine problem on the plane. And it was at that point that I heard that Viola Liuzzo had been assassinated, had been killed because she was carrying a Black marcher back to Selma, and she was a white woman. So it threw a pale on that activity that day. We were singing songs, We Shall Overcome, all of the glorious things. And even then I knew that what we thought we had accomplished, and we had accomplished a lot, because as Connie mentioned, in the summer of 1965, the 1965 Civil Rights Act was passed. Connie also mentioned about the 2013 destruction of a section of that act that really weakened the act to such an extent that it's no longer recognizable. What I find it's an irony in that the Selma to Montgomery March, with all of the hardships, with all of the deaths, with all of the beatings that occurred, it occurred in Selma. It's ironic that in 2013, it was the Selma Eric Holder Supreme Court decision that gutted that act. It just seemed unbelievable that Selma could take us through all of the trauma, the deaths in 1965. And it was that same Selma that in the end took revenge. They ended up just where they were before we were beaten on the grounds. I think about that often. It's almost unbearable to say that all of the things that we did, and yet we are back where we started from, which leads me to another point, that fighting for justice and equality is a never-ending struggle. When you think you have it made, you don't. It's a year in, year out, everlasting struggle to eventually come to a point where we can say, well, yes, we have accomplished the goals that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution has provided. We still have a long way to go, but that's part of my storytelling. There's a lot, I was a history major, so I could give you a lot of other historical points and events leading to, you mentioned the Florida massacre. That was among the first one that to my memory was shortly after the Reconstruction era was over. And here again, it was in North Carolina. It was a city in Wilmington, North Carolina, where people in that community, Blacks in that community, it was an all Black community, wanted to vote. And because they did, their entire city was burned to the ground because of the right to vote. And as Connie mentioned, in the shortly after the Civil War ended, the Ku Klux Klan was organized. Here again, that was Tennessee, Nathan Bedford Forrest. And that same terrorist group has been active in the United States of America from 1867, 66, 67, and we know that it's a part of our communities today. South, North, East, West, it doesn't make any difference where you live. A Ku Klux Klan member is still there functioning. And so when I come to 2020 and I think of the votes that in the end, we're already voting, but November 3rd will soon be here. I do believe that because of technology, because of what people saw with their own eyes, for one simple reason, they were mostly at home because they couldn't be anywhere else with COVID-19. And so there was time to look at the television and they saw a crucifixion in front of their own eyes with this Black body on the sidewalk, on the streets, with a white knee with blue, wearing blue, crushing him to death. And it's unfortunate that an event of that gross inhumanity was what would be the cause of people getting out on the streets to march, and yet it happened. So when I see on the streets of DC, white people, Asian people, Latino people, indigenous people, all people coming together to know that what they witnessed was inhumane and should not be a part of anybody's lifestyle. And I believe that I know that something good is going to come out of that, because I believe that we're on a path, once again, that will take us to another step toward perfecting our union. We won't have perfected it, but we'll be in the process of perfecting the union once more. And so I'm encouraging everybody who has not yet voted or who's not made up their mind think about it. Think about its seriousness, because we're not just talking about voting rights and equality. We're talking about the integrity of the institutions that define our democracy are in shambles at this point. And if we don't have those institutions that are strong and meaningful, then what good is a vote if you're under authoritarian rule? So my last remark, please get out there and vote. Vote your conscience. Your vote matters. It does make a difference. Don't sit back and think, oh, I'm just one person. You are somebody, and your vote matters just like you do.
Thank you, Miss Margaret. I just that was invaluable. I know we're kind of all over the place here tonight, and I figured, you know what, forget about it. I'm just going to let it flow and let spirit do what it has to do. You didn't get a chance to introduce yourself. I was going to do it when I introduced CJ and Ross. But if you could let everyone know who you are, and then we'll talk to CJ and Ross about Resisterhood.
Well, my name is Margaret Morrison. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, lived in Chicago for a while. I'm a retired educator. I've been a teacher of history. I've been a high school counselor. I've been an assistant principal. I've retired from the position of supervisor of guidance for Montgomery County Public Schools. And I know Reverend Mark does not know me, but I know him through some cousins of mine, Julie and Kay Francis, Oliver Johnson. Yeah, right. Their father, their grandfather, and my dad were brothers.
Yes.
That's the relationship.
Yes, yes. I remember now. Yes. God bless you.
Thank you. And
Your family.
Yes.
Miss Margaret, I saw in the documentary, looking through the photo albums, Alpha Kappa Alpha. Did you happen to pledge?
I did, yeah. In fact, I went to Lemoyne College in Memphis, Tennessee, historically Black university, and I was a bachelor's of my chapter, AKA, in my senior year. One other thing about AKA, I have a great aunt, Vivian Johnson Cook, who established the graduate chapter of AKA in Baltimore. So I come from an AKA family of long years back. Yeah. I have sisters who are AKA, cousins who are AKA, you name it. We're an AKA family. And of course, we're all pulling for Kamala Harris and Joe Biden.
Absolutely. And I am happy to call you Soror.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. I knew there was a connection.
Seems like AKA is a really big deal right now. I can't
hold on.
imagine why.
You said right now.
At this particular moment,
Well, we've always been
time. I can't imagine
why
it's such a big deal right before this election. Is somebody running an AKA? Is that what it is?
Well, I know, not really. Not really. Somebody has just won. That's what you mean, not running. They've already won.
That's right.
So thank you. And Ms. Margaret, I hope that wasn't your last thing that you had to say. We look forward to engaging you a little more, along with director CJ Crim and one of the cinematographers of this awesome documentary, Resisterhood. If you all have not seen it yet, please do. CJ, I'm going to play the trailer, and then would love for you and Ross just to come in and chat it up, for you to tell us why you felt the need to make this moving documentary. I'm so glad that you did. And I know we're getting up on time, so I'm going to figure out how to do this technologically. And then I just gotta pull it up. And then we'll have you share. Okay. Let's make sure you can see this. All right, can everyone see the screen?
And he had the audacity to ask, why couldn't I vote for him? What did I have to lose? Everything.
How's your audio?
Be here or outside at the inauguration ceremony. The event I'm going to is the Women's March on Washington. Thank God to the women for having invited and called us all together.
To me, it's like a very simple message. You're not alone.
Makes America great.
I want to stand up for people who are in danger. And I want to use the incredible platform that I have to make someone else feel more comfortable in their own skin.
When I got to see my name in the ballot, that was the most exciting moment in my whole life.
And I look to you to be that other generation that will carry forth the march for freedom.
She made sure that her voice was heard. And I thought, if she can do this, then I can do this.
The single largest electoral force in the United States of America is women.
Good morning, resistors.
You gotta vote, you gotta educate yourself, you gotta get out there, you gotta fight for what you believe in.
Women all around, raise your fists! Now is the time we must resist!
There's an incredible amount of opportunity now for all of us to rise up and to really stand for something.
Let's rise up! Let's march on Washington! Our footsteps and our voices will be heard!
Okay. Okay, so introducing CJ Crim, Ross Stansfield, and again, Miss Margaret Morrison. CJ.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. It's really not fair to have to speak after Margaret. Margaret is, well, I said in the chat, Margaret is a national treasure. She's also an incredible inspiration to me. I think about her daily and her energy, her enthusiasm, and her hopefulness after going through what she's been through in her 84 young years is just a continuing inspiration. And I'm so honored to have met her and have her be able to tell her story, at least part of her story, in the documentary Resisterhood. And Resisterhood, well, you know, after the 2016 election, there were a lot of women, especially, who said no, who said this is not the person who represents us, and we have to stand up and make our voices heard. And so what I really wanted to do was find women who were represented some of the groups that this president as a candidate just outright defamed and threatened and really tried to just rip apart. And how are we going to respond? Because he also attacked women in general. And so we found some amazing subjects, and through the film, we followed them for 2 years, from the Women's March through the midterm elections, and they really told their stories. They made my job easy, because what you see on the film is their genuine, amazing personality and character come through. And I hope that the film is inspirational as these individuals whose stories we tell in the film are to me.
Thank you. And Cheryl, if you can put the link where people can watch the film, whether it was Amazon Prime, on the website, that will be fantastic.
And yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. And Ross, can you, as one of the cinematographers on the documentary, can you tell us a little bit about your experience? And it would be interesting to hearing from you, a white male, when so much is focused now on women, our voices, on people of color, Black and Indigenous people. So would love to hear from you.
Great. Well, it's wonderful being here. it was fantastic working with Cheryl, Margaret, and all the others on this film. I learned a lot. A little history, my family came here on the Mayflower. So we go back, way back. And I grew up in a house in Alexandria, 5th generation, bought by my great-great-great-great-grandfather, the clipper ship captain. On the wall was Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson in the formal dining room. The property was a third of a city block. Well, so that's there. The Union Army was camped outside during the war because Alexandria was immediately taken over because of the port and the railroads and the proximity of DC. So we had a whole fence made out of tent poles. I still have 3 of them because when they broke the camp, they left everything. On this film, it was great. I learned and was able to expand what I knew and believed. I never believed that some of the things that happened in the Civil War were good. It just wasn't something that I believed in. Cheryl had put out a request on the TIVA, Television Internet Video Association, asking for help. And after seeing Trump and his bus chat, I'm like, this guy is awful. There's no way. And so I was all in to helping her on that Women's March, which was really cool. I also went to Woodstock. Woodstock was about half the size. In Woodstock, you could see everybody. You couldn't see everybody at the Women's March. They're everywhere, behind you, in front of you, up. I remember when it was time to leave, I was the lead elephant. They're all holding on to me, and I'm trying to pull us through this immense crowd. It took a half an hour to get out of there. There were so many people wanting to be protesting against Donald J. Trump. I think that the film is very, very, very strong, and I'm hoping Cheryl will put it into the Academy Awards because I think it could win. Just a note, because it's an important document of this time. We'll know more in a couple of weeks as to where we are. I don't think it's going to happen November 4th, but we'll see what this all means. It may be there'll be a new film, unless, of course, they arrest us for being activists. So we'll see. So, Manda, thank you for having us here. I also will mention with Margaret, I've interviewed her for several other projects, and she is a historian, as am I. And she's always giving me more, sometimes 2 to 3 times more than they asked for, but I can't cut it because it's all good. She's very logical. She has her facts straight. She tells a wonderful story, and it's a story that people need to hear. So I say, hey, you only want 2 minutes, you get 7, you're gonna have to live with it. So that's all for now.
Thanks, Ross. And Miss Margaret, we hear if you can see it, you can be it. And one of the things that struck me in the documentary is from what I saw, the importance that you placed on sharing knowledge and history with your nephew, and how he then was moved to feel that he could do it and he could march. And you also see that with some of the other people in the film, how their actions impacted other people around them in other communities and in minority communities. So can you tell us a little bit about the importance of passing on legacy?
Right. It has been something that I've been thinking about for a long time, but it was only in the past couple of decades that I did something about it. And that is, I began to write newsletters for immediate family. At beginning, just my family, immediate family. Then over the years, I expanded it so that they know as much about my history as I do, because I would do monthly newsletters for them, pick a particular person who had been enslaved and follow them through their death. And that's where some of my scrapbooks come from. So I combine scrapbooking with genealogy, with history. And so it's a pictorial that all of my nieces and nephews have because I've made albums. Dallas, the young man you see in the film, has two older brothers. And so they have albums that I've made, and their parents go through those albums with them. And so they know a lot of the history. And it's amazing to see them and to hear them and to know that they are listening. They are taking tips about how to go out into the United States of America, not just in their neighborhoods, and present themselves with a knowledge and a base where they may never know who their real names are, because all names are lost in antiquity, but they know who they are. And that's the point I try to get across to all of the people that I meet in my family. And I've expanded that to their friends and their friends' friends, so that if it's one thing that I can just share with an entire world, if you know who you are, and if you strive to be the best person you are, and if you know where you come from, then you've got life 95% beat at that point. Another thing my parents always told me, Margaret, there's no need to get mad or angry. That doesn't solve anything. What you need to do is find out how to address the issue and go on and resolve it. A reframing of a problem so that the problem becomes something that you can handle and that you can correct, that you can find a solution for. And which brings me to the race relations. As horrible as they are, I can't imagine what my great-great-great-great-grandparents went through. And even though I was born under Jim Crow laws, so were my parents, and so were her parents, and the parents before that had been enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think of their resiliency and their devotion to making a life for the children that they may never have seen grown up, I say, well, I can do that too. I can find that courage inside me to make the world better for somebody else, which led me also to a continuous life of activism, or to be of some help where I could be, without being naive about the problems that we're still facing, because they are tremendous problems and they won't be solved in a decade. They won't be solved in my lifetime and probably yours. But as long as I can see a forward movement, 3 steps ahead, but 2 steps back, but still moving forward, I'm satisfied, because I know that there are at least 1/3 of white America who will refuse to see me as a human being.
Mm.
And I know that to be a fact. I don't think that will ever change. But I think the other 2/3 of what I'm dealing with, and those are the people, those are the ones you see on the streets today, young white girls and boys and older white people voting. One of the things that struck me is so wonderful. In Portland, Oregon, I saw these white women out on the streets, but I remembered how Oregon became a state. They did not want a Black person in the state of Oregon. Their state, when they became a state, that was part of what their constitution was. No Blacks allowed. They were against slavery, but they felt no Black person should live in Oregon. And so that was so amazing to me to see these white women in a state of Oregon protesting the death of the crucifixion of Mr. Floyd. It was amazing. So there's always something positive happening, even though we think it's so solemn and so sorrowful of what's going on around you. There's some bright light coming up from underneath something. And this is what makes me feel so persistent, that I know that something is going to happen soon. It's what John Lewis would say, well, yes, got to get in trouble, got to be good trouble, but get in trouble And I'm hoping that that's what all of us do every day of our lives, whether it's a protest march or whether speaking up and not staying silent, because staying silent does not help the situation. Speak up. Something's wrong, say something. Don't bite your tongue. Let them know that, no, this is not how we're going to do this. I think silence more than anything is more detrimental than people who just come out and tell you, I hate you, because you don't know what that person is thinking, that they are saying nothing. So that's what I also tell my young relatives. Don't be frightened to speak your mind. Know your facts and talk. And that's what Dulles does in this film.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Margaret. So we have about 15 minutes left, and I wanted to introduce a gentleman that I've known since I was a teenager, Reverend Mark Thompson. And as you can see,
Wait a minute. Weren't we teenagers together at the same time? Like,
so the two black and white pictures that you see, can everyone see those pictures?
Mm-hmm.
I was at Howard University. I was working as a freelance reporter for the Afro-American newspaper. And Mark Thompson was raising good trouble on the steps in the quad of Howard University. And I just, Mark, I thought I would surprise you with these pictures, but
Well,
in the middle, we can see you several years later with with Jesse Jackson, the late John Lewis, and looks like Barbara.
yeah, that's Reverend Barbara.
Reverend Barbara. So that's fantastic. And I want to thank you for being here tonight. If you and to also share with people how they can follow you daily with your podcast. And I just want to ask a question. I'm going to go to this. But just speaking of legacy, the gentleman that is in the White House now has, I think, whether it's been 4 years of like a bull in a china cabinet, and I think all of us have felt that energy. And I'm even more disappointed with the people who knew better, who followed. But there are some things that he has done that I don't know if that can be undone. And I wanted to ask you about primarily dealing with the court appointees, which caused me great concern. So as you all can see, there were Article 3, 202 Article 3 federal judges appointed by the president. And that's, we just had an example of that with the Supreme Court of the United States during this term, and this is by August, so it's a little over 3.5 years. He's appointed 53 U.S. Court of Appeals judges, whereas the median average is 35, and 145 U.S. District Court of Appeals. So, Mark, besides just presidential in terms of this election, what does this mean after November 3rd?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, and I'm honored to be on with all of the distinguished people and speakers that have spoken. The picture you showed from Selma, I was enjoying what Sister St. John was saying. This is going on probably my almost 30th year on the board of the Bridge Crossing Jubilee in Selma. We organize annually the only civil rights commemoration that actually takes place every year in Selma. And this is the first time we'll be virtual. Normally we cross the bridge together, and that picture was of John Lewis and me. And in one of his last visits to the bridge, before the very last one earlier this year, that is a sacred space. That is our people's Calvary for voting rights. Without Selma, we would not be able to vote in the way that we've been today. I'm thankful to cousin Margaret as well. I was just texting Kay and Julie and Oliver that we are together tonight, a member of my extended family. And what a great story and legacy she has shared. I'll be as brief as I can since you asked me a specific question, Manda. We are dealing with disinformation warfare. And what I mean by that is Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are being hammered with this question of, are you going to pack the court? Are you going to pack the court? And this is coming from the mainstream media that has manufactured a false equivalency between the two parties. Never once were Trump nor McConnell asked about packing the court. And as that statistic Manda just had up on the screen said, that's where the court packing has taken place. We have a National Bar Association because the American Bar Association was segregated. That's the white lawyers. Most of those judges, if not all of them, that Trump and McConnell have rammed through, including Amy Coney Barrett, or Amy COVID Barrett, as she should be called, were ranked unqualified by the American Bar Association, the white Bar Association. Now, of course, it's integrated now, but you see my point. Not a single one of those judges, not a single one of them is a person of color, by the way, but those judges have been ranked unqualified. Amy COVID Barrett is an existential threat to election night, because we've already got an indication of what they're going to try to do. Many states count their mail-in ballots the night of election night and in subsequent days. That's normal. That's par for the course. Everyone does that. A handful are counting mail-in ballots as they come in. One of those states, for example, is Florida, thank God. But other states, 3 critical ones, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, count those votes into the night and on into subsequent days. So Brett Kavanaugh, another judge that was rammed through, wrote in an opinion when the decision was rendered that Wisconsin had to stop its count, has to stop its count on election night at midnight, said that it should not go beyond that. So what we can anticipate in close states, Amy COVID Barrett, beer drinking, Brett Kavanaugh, and others are going to stop those counts to try to keep Donald Trump in office. And this is the importance of the judiciary. What others have said about the sacredness of the vote is also being undermined vis-a-vis disinformation. Black men are being targeted more than any other group to either stay home or go along with Trump's statement, what the hell have I got to lose? So rappers and entertainers, Ice Cube, even Lil Pump came out today. I'm with Trump. That's insane. And for Black men to be led down a path that what Margaret Morrison went through and other ancestors who've gone on have gone through, and what John Lewis went through is invalid, like it doesn't matter, it doesn't count, is completely absurd. I had a Black man tell me who lives in Alabama, I don't vote because it doesn't make a difference. The Black people voting in Alabama is what prevented pedophile Roy Moore from being sent to the Senate. So it does make a difference. We've not seen this type of disinformation at any other time. When Barack Obama was on the ballot, you didn't hear all of that. What happened now all of a sudden in the past 4 years to convince so many of my brethren that their vote literally doesn't matter and there's no point in casting it, but targeted disinformation. Now, they've targeted the entire Black community, but specifically Black men are more susceptible because they've gotten some of these entertainers. And we've always had that. We've always had entertainers and minstrels that were used to divide and conquer our people. So we have to be aware of that. We are up against disinformation. There is a level of misogyny because there's a woman on the ticket. And I've said to my brethren, it is time to let Black women lead. In reality, Black women have always led, whether we want to admit it or not. There's no Black church without Black women. There was no civil rights movement without Black women, whether Black women got the credit that they deserved or not. And we know that in most instances, they didn't. So when some of these brothers say to me, we're tired of the Democratic Party giving us old white men. Well, they didn't give you an old white man. They gave you a Black woman, and you didn't support her in the first place because she was targeted by Steve Bannon and Russia because they realized as a prosecutor, she was the biggest threat to run against a president who happens to be a criminal. And so we have to be very, very clear about what is going on. Our lives are at stake. And for many Black men, the last thing I'll say, issue of criminal justice. Well, watch this. If you let someone else pick all the judges, there never will be a fair and equitable criminal justice system. The only hope we have is to do what is necessary to change and to seek justice and to vote in such a way that it is in our best interest. Thank you.
Reverend Mark Thompson, Matsamelo Mafumo, thank you so very much. I wanted to recognize a few people because we didn't have questions from the audience just yet. And if anyone can hang on, please feel free as we kind of switch gears here. And Mark, don't go anywhere, please. I wanted to, first of all, thank Hayden, this gentleman on the line whom I met through Mali Pompadit, who's on the line with, the Zoom call with the SOAR Community Network. Hayden is from Iceland, and it is like almost midnight where he is. So we understand, this lets me know that this is more than just a U.S. problem, that this is a global and a global problem, and that there are people who care and want to see what's going on in our country. So Hayden, thank you so much for joining us. Melissa Houghton, the Executive Director of Women in Film and Video. Melissa, thank you so much for coming on. She literally hosted CJ and Miss Margaret, and I think another woman from the film in a Zoom call before this. So these guys, they're thank you again for being here. I know you're tired, you're doing the circuit, but thank you so much for this film. And again, make sure you watch Resisterhood. We've got Mr. Omar Wynn from the Smithsonian Institution has joined us, and I'm sure that he has really enjoyed, as the rest of us have, listening to the stories of Miss Margaret. And to all my friends and relatives and other sorors out there, I thank you so much for joining us. So Rhonda, how are we doing with questions in the chat? Anyone?
We've been great listeners pretty much this entire time. It's been so beautiful and very educational. We've had a lot of comments thanking Miss Margaret and our previous guest. So we have Catherine White, who just mentioned how she's very blown away from what she's heard this evening. And Miss Titra Hamilton had mentioned earlier this evening that she was about to watch the 9 minutes of 45's rally, but the language was so horrible. So she understands what's going on. I posted about Reverend Mark Thompson is from the Make It Plain podcast. So you're more than welcome to tune in for the future. And we do not have any questions, but we are welcoming some questions or comments right now.
Okay. And I also I'm sorry, I meant to recognize Catherine White, who's out there in Northern Virginia doing the most. For Catherine, are you there? Can you talk to us about what's good? Because I know in Virginia they've extended poll hours. There have been challenges since September 18th. You guys were opening, and so now they've added an extra couple of days. Is there anything you want to speak to with regard to that? Because there are a few people on this line who reside.
You mean for Virginia? You mean,
Yes.
well, we've had started early voting. Sorry, I've been out shopping and listening because I've had one of those days. So I have been just really riveted by grocery shopping. What I'm hearing here? You know, Virginia had started early voting September 18th. So we're a lucky state for that. And elections do matter. They matter. In Virginia, I've been in the grassroots and along with other people fighting for about 3.5 years, and we flipped Virginia blue. And having that legislature be Democratic and the executive has allowed people to vote freely, and early, and in so many different ways, and safely, which should be a right of everybody in every state. And that, you know, the voter suppression is wide. We're luckier in Virginia because we have the ability to vote early. And it wasn't extended. We still will, you know, what happened was voter registration went down, someone cut the wire. So then they extended the voter registration, but voting has been going on. We have 45 days of early voting. How cool is that?
Awesome. Did anyone want to speak? Thank you, Catherine. Did anyone want to speak about their voting experiences? Or Mark, did you have anything else that you wanted to talk to with regard to the landscape? I mean, you talk to like super important people every day on your podcast. So, is there anything that you feel germane to this conversation?
I think I've said it. I mean, people have got to get out and vote, and not wait until Tuesday. You know, because you're right, our lives depend on it. I spoke with a guest earlier today, and a point I didn't make earlier, just to add, there is an ongoing war being waged against women in general, and not just Black women. The possibility, and Connie talked about how they gutted the Voting Rights Act, and they're not finished. They may gut it some more. They're going to try to gut the Affordable Care Act, and then they're going after Roe. You know, I spoke to a guest earlier today who opened up about some life-threatening complications she had during her pregnancy years ago. And she survived, obviously, thankfully. But she had health care. She was in a position in life where she had coverage, and still her life was in danger, mortal danger during this pregnancy. I'm afraid that some don't realize, some do, those who are, you know, cosplaying The Handmaid's Tale along with Barrett. It was what, at the most 60 years ago, when it was not unusual for some women to die during pregnancy and in childbirth. I don't talk about that as much, but when you put somebody on the court to threaten women's access to reproductive health, and that goes even far and beyond access to abortion. When you put somebody on the court to threaten that, that's an existential and mortal threat to women in this country. And I hope people really get that and understand that this is a very critical and dangerous moment in which we live. And so, I hope people would, not just vote for a particular personality, but the courts are at stake, down ballot races are at stake. We're talking about redistricting, gerrymandering that can be confronted if you get involved in state legislative races and vote for those too. It's too important not to do. And as State Senator Malcolm Kenyatta from Pennsylvania he's actually in Philadelphia, where Walter Wallace was just assassinated by the police. He said, he says to people who say they don't do politics, if you don't do politics, politics does you. And so you have got to be aware, you have got to vote. And even when you think that it doesn't make a difference, or you're fed up, or you're tired, think about Fannie Lou Hamer. Think about John Lewis and how tired and C.T. Vivian and Joseph Lowry, whom we've just lost this year. Think about all of those who were tired and gave their lives, and get up off your own rusty dusty and get to the voting booth.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else before we close for the evening?
Yeah, I would like to make one other comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm past the 2020. I know that we have won that. So I'm now at the midterm elections. You need to get out and vote all over again like your lives depend on it. Because if you do what we did to President Obama at the midterm in 2010, we've lost everything we've been fighting for. Midterms are important. Don't rest on the laurels after we win in 2020. Please, let's spread that news every single day so that everybody's reminded that 2022 is as important as a 2020. I rest my case.
Amen. Amen. Linda Eady, director of the Denton Black Film Festival, did you want to share what was going on in Texas? Okay. Linda may have taken a little bio break. Okay. Anyone else? Any comments, observations, questions? We have a treasure. We got a treasure on a Zoom call. Any questions for Miss Margaret?
You really do. Hey, Monda, it's Spring. Oh, I didn't realize my video wasn't on. But I actually asked a question, and I think they think I was serious. But I was serious. I asked what was Miss Margaret doing on voting day, because I want to come out and work with her.
Well, because
on November 3rd, because of COVID, you're staying in?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna get out there and do some work in your name, okay?
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll get t-shirts, Spring.
I think so. I need a t-shirt. We're gonna go out here and make some good trouble, for real.
Oh, I have a good trouble t-shirt. I have a Kamala Harris t-shirt. All right. Resisterhood t-shirt.
Okay, I'm not surprised. I got it. Okay, awesome. I'm not surprised at all, but I just thank you for your work. I thank you for your efforts. You look like we're family. You actually really do look like my group of aunts on my mom's side, and none of them are with us right now. And the whole time you were talking, I was in tears remembering when they were getting on the buses to march and stuff. We lived in Detroit. Yeah. We were in Detroit, but my earliest childhood memory is probably 1968, the day Martin Luther King was killed. And they were so torn up that I honestly, for many years, thought Martin Luther King was my uncle, because I remembered them getting on the buses and going down for the funeral. And we have such a big family, I honestly thought that he was my uncle, but also I remember the work. I do remember the work. I remember, even I'm 57 now, but I remember the work from my early years that they were doing, and I just want to thank you.
Thank you.
Linda,
Well,
you
yes,
with us.
I finally figured it out here. So I was just going to say, here in Texas, if people don't get out and vote, I don't know what else could make you want to. It is so, I mean, there is no shame in their game in terms of trying to keep people from voting and making it very difficult. They have set up where there are drop boxes where you can take your mail-in, you know, if you had a mail-in ballot, if you were able to vote that way. Or through early voting, think there's only like one drop off per county. Now, some of those counties, I mean, Texas has 3 of the largest cities in the top 10. So for you to say in a county, you only have one location where you can drop off your vote, that is a hardship that, you know, many people are just not going to be able to take advantage of that opportunity to do that. And especially in this time of COVID-19. But you can see that in Houston, which is just a huge, if you've ever been there, it is a huge county, huge city and county. So for you to only have one place where you can drop off your vote, I mean, it's very obvious. So, I mean, if that doesn't motivate us to get out, I don't know what will. But, you know, I voted, and my husband, I'm on my kids, telling everybody I see to vote. So I'm just hoping that we get, you know, what we're looking for on November 3rd, but realizing that that's just the work beginning because we have so much work to do. Like Miss Margaret said, you can't stop after that. We got to keep going and not drop the ball again. So thank you, Monda, for everything you are doing and for all the people that are attending, Reverend Thompson, Miss Margaret, Connie, thanks for sharing all of your stories and your word tonight. It's really appreciated. It just kind of reinforces everything that we know and that we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah.
Going once? Going twice? Tamika Moore, anything about the words you've heard?
I want to pop in there and just say one thing that Margaret told me that I just loved, because I was saying, Margaret, we're going to celebrate on November 4th. And she goes, well, we'll celebrate then, but the real celebration is going to be January 20th, 2020 WON. So that comes straight from Margaret. And that is when we will really, really have the party.
Okay, I know we will all be able to exhale. So thank you everyone who has attended this Healing Chronicles tonight. It has been recorded. It will be on YouTube sometime tomorrow. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your candor, and I love your stories. Miss Margaret, just to let you know, Soror Lottie Joyner from Crisis Magazine already said I have class tonight, but please, I would love to interview her. So if you're okay, I'll make the introduction, and you know you can have some more stories to tell and different.
Well, Ross and Cheryl know that I enjoyed talking.
Thank you, CJ. Thank you so much. Thanks again to all of you for coming. And next month we're going to talk about mental health for the holidays as well as physical health. So I just need to lock down the date and I'll let you all know and hope to see you there.
Thank you, Monda.
Thank you, Rhonda, for being the co-hostess with the mostest. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone, for
Thank you,
tuning
Rhonda.
in.
Thank you, Monda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monda. Thank you, Rhonda.
Bless you. Connie, you need to come to Selma with us. And,
thank you, cousin.
Cousin Margaret, I'll be in touch.
Please do. Okay. Good. And good night, Soror.
Good night. Good night.
Good night, Soror.
Good night, Soror. Bye, everyone. Okay, let me